What's up, everybody? It's GauntletX back again to talk about more War of the Sparks spoilers, so let's just get right on with it. We'll start off with Hartfire. It's 1 and a red for an instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature or planeswalker. Hartfire deals 4 damage to any target. This card is very exciting for standard mono-red decks. It seems really good against Esper Control. One of their best ways to get back into the game after an early aggressive start from you is to use these removal spells that gain them life as they cast them, like Moment of Craving and Vraska's Contempt. This gives you a really nice counter to those spells if you play around your opponent casting like a Moment of Craving or Vraska's Contempt on the attacks. So the thing about that whole thing is, I think that if this card is popular enough that it is in most of the red decks, it'll actually just like shift the meta between mono red and Esper Control. Of like, Esper Control players will learn to play around this, and they'll probably just do it, you know, during their main phase instead of using the removal during your turn in response to attacks anymore. But even just like the threat of having this card forcing them to use the removal at sorcery speed is powerful enough on its own. And I also think that the card is fine just for giving you those last few points of damage after your opponent has established a board presence of their own, and maybe their creatures are better than yours, so your creatures are just kind of sitting there not being able to break through their wall. Might as well just throw them at their face. So I think the card's pretty good. I'm definitely going to try out like I'm going to try it out as a 2 of at first, just 2 copies in my deck, because I think that in the hands where you just draw a bunch of burn spells and like 1 creature, I think this card's really bad, because if they remove your 1 creature, then you could just be stuck with Heartfires in your hand that you literally can't cast. That is a pretty big downside, so I don't know if this is a card that you should ever play 4 of, but we'll see how the meta shifts, and maybe there's some more like good red aggressive creatures, and we'll run a higher count of creatures to make our Heartfires work better. I don't even know what we cut at that point, like maybe like 2 Lightning Strike or something like that. But yeah, I'm very excited to see how the card does in Standard at the very least. Next up, we have Bloomhulk, 3 and a green for a 4/4 plant elemental. When Bloomhulk enters the battlefield, proliferate. So this is exciting for an entirely different reason. At a base power line level, this is not exciting at all for Standard or just in terms of being a tremendously good card. But in terms of power level, for limited at the common level, this card's insanely exciting. It's 3 and a green for a 4/4, so it's an easy to cast 4/4. It's not even 2 green and 2. And it has the upside of having the enter the battlefield proliferate trigger. I have this in here kind of just as a stand-in for all of the really good limited commons that we're seeing. I think that this is all shaping up to be a pretty powerful limited format, a very exciting limited format, and I'm super glad to see that. Bloomhulk is in here basically just to say I'm very excited about the power level of the limited format in general. It seems like the commons are all looking pretty strong, or at least a few of them are looking pretty strong for limited. Next up, we have Massacre Girl, 3 and 2 black for a 4/4 legendary human assassin. She has menace, and when she enters the battlefield, each other creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. Whenever a creature dies this turn, each creature other than Massacre Girl gets -1/-1 until end of turn. I honestly have no idea if this is any good in anything. I just really like the effect. I think it's a very, very cool way to stack up -1/-1s into this crazy, like, possible board wipe. I love that it's like, you get to like look around the board and be like, alright, there's 1 toughness there, there's 2 toughness there, 3 toughness there. Like, it's this big chain reaction that just keeps spiraling into just a massive, like, -9 or something. So I just think that the effect is really cool, and it's a really interestingly designed card. So I'm happy to see that. Next up, we have Mobilized District. It is a land, taps for a colorless, or you can spend 4 to make it become a 3/3 citizen creature with vigilance until the end of turn. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature and planeswalker you control. So, obviously, this card is adorable. Everybody's like gathering around singing Kumbaya. They're definitely going to get killed. But it's cute at the very least. The coolest thing about this card for me is I really like effects that can get cheaper based on what's going on in the game, based on what you have on the field or something like that. So I just like the fact that you could activate this for 0 if you have 4 planeswalkers on the field if you're in some kind of Super Friends deck, and then you could just be like, alright, well, my primary creature is just my random 3/3 land. I think that's neat. I don't think it's particularly like the strongest thing ever, but it is a man land, and I think that even just like 4 mana for the 3/3 vigilance is fine. So I do think that like because it's a land, it's probably a pretty strong card. Just because you don't have to spend a whole lot to put it in your deck, you just have to put in some colorless sources. But yeah, it's not that insane. Like it's easy enough to kill. It's a 3/3. You can throw a lightning strike at that. You can, I guess you can't Moment of Craving it, but we have plenty of ways to kill 3/3s at instant speed and standard, so I don't expect this to be the scariest thing ever. But the fact that you can get some bonus off of just having your land be a creature is cool, and it's nice to see man lands back in the game. Next up, we have Mayhem Devil. 1 black and red for a 3/3 devil. Whenever a player sacrifices a permanent, Mayhem Devil deals 1 damage to any target. So I'm primarily excited for this card for my Judith the Scourge Diva commander deck. This obviously slots into that perfectly. You run a lot of sacrifice outlets and creatures that are good at coming back from the grave. And when you're going to be sacrificing a bunch of stuff, Mayhem Devil is going to be doing a bunch of damage, just like Judith. So that's super cool. There's also some really cute things that you can do with this card that are nice. I love how like combo-y it is, like how it's really got people thinking about what kind of weird things you can do with it. So stuff like we have Scape Shift in Standard, so you could sack all your lands. So you would deal damage to your opponent equal to the number of lands you control, which could be really nice. I guess it's to any target as well, so you could just like wipe their board off a Scape Shift possibly. There's also Bolas's Citadel. Obviously you're sacking 10 permanents, so you just immediately 20 them, and hopefully they're just dead. Yeah, so there's cute stuff you can do with it in Standard, and then obviously in older formats you have fetch lands. So just in playing your mana base, you could be doing damage to people. So definitely a cool little build-around style card that has a lot of cool, interesting combos and stuff you could try to do with it. So I like the card a lot. Next up we have Merfolk Skydiver. It's a green and a blue for a 1/1 flying Merfolk mutant. When it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, and for 3, a green and a blue, proliferate. This card is super cool for Limited and for Commander, my 2 favorite formats. So at worst in Limited, it's a 2-mana 2/2 flyer, which is not that bad. And if you can make it up to the mana to use the proliferate ability, then you're just going to be having a fun time, because you could proliferate every single turn if you wanted to, if you had enough stuff out with counters. But just having the ability to do it is pretty nice. This is also super cool for Commander, because obviously in Commander you have all kinds of ramp, the games tend to go long, you tend to have a lot of permanents, even your opponents have a bunch of permanents, so you could proliferate onto their stuff too. I could see you being able to use this ability 2 or 3 times late game in Commander if you're in a rampy deck, so it's going to be a real fun time. Next up we have Mizium Tank. 2 red and 1 for a 3/2 trample vehicle. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell until end of turn, it gets +1/+1 and becomes an artifact creature until end of turn, and it crews for 1. I think that this card is another really cool design. I love the vehicles that have alternate ways of becoming creatures. I like that this just activates itself whenever you cast a non-creature spell. And the crew cost is nice and low. The crew cost is only 1 to make it the 3/2 trample, so I'm actually, like, I'm enough interested in this card, just in terms of how cool the abilities are and how nice the artwork is, that I'm definitely going to try it out in mono red. I don't know if it's the best thing you can do in mono red, but it doesn't seem that bad. I mean, it's a 3-mana, 3/2 trample vehicle, so because it's a vehicle, you have to tap another creature to activate it, but the thing is, it activates itself whenever you cast a non-creature spell, which these mono-red burn decks have a lot of. You have Light Up the Stage, you have all your burn spells, and stuff like Experimental Frenzy that you could just really go off. So the thing is, it gets the +1/+1 every time you cast a non-creature spell. So you don't even have to worry about, like, slowing down on your usage of the spells to get more value out of the tank, because you could crew it and give it even more pluses all in one turn, which is nice. And it also crews for only 1, so if you have one of those awkward top decks in the late game, where you're, like, stuck with, you have, like, a Mizium tank on the battlefield and your opponent's starting to stabilize, you could just, like, top deck a Runaway Steamkin and just immediately crew the tank, which is nice. And even just any of your smaller creatures can crew the tank and immediately attack. So I think this could actually be a real threat in red decks. It's something I'm definitely going to try out. I don't want to say that it's definitely a good card in mono red, but I do want to say I think it's worth trying, and it's something that if nobody else tries, at least I will, because it looks fun and it looks cool. Next up, we have Krenko Tin Street Kingpin, 2 and a red for a legendary goblin. Whenever Krenko Tin Street Kingpin attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on Krenko, then create a number of 1/1 red goblin creature tokens equal to his power. And he's a 1/2, I don't remember if I mentioned that. So this card's really cute. I think there's a lot of super cool stuff you can do with it. I think it's cool because we have so many different goblin stuff, but goblins have just, like, never quite gotten there in terms of being a really good goblin deck in Standard, so I hope that we just get a little more goblin stuff like Krenko to push those decks over the top. I think this is a really fun build-around card, just in a deck with a bunch of pump spells. We've seen that we have some powerful pump spells in Standard. We've seen Colossus seeing, like, legitimate competitive play in red-green burn decks, red-green stompy style decks. And this is obviously great with Colossus, because, you know, you get the extra damage from Colossus like normal, but you also get 4 extra goblins for casting Colossus, so that's super cool. We have a lot of pump spells in Standard right now. Giant Growth just got reprinted. We have Might of the Masses, which is cute with this. I don't think Might of the Masses is the best, just because, yeah, you could make them really big and make a lot of tokens, but if you were already in a position where Might of the Masses was going to give them, like, +6/+6, you were probably already going to win. So, but it's cool. It's definitely cool. Yeah, and there's cute stuff. You know, you can use Angelic Exaltation and stuff like that to just do stupid things as well. But yeah, it's just a really fun build around. I don't know if it's the best thing in the world, but it's a cool card. I'm excited to see it nonetheless. Next up, we have Rescuer Sphinx. 2 blue and 2 more for a 3/2 Flying Sphinx. When it enters the battlefield, you may return a non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand, and if you do, it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. Wow, this card is so strong in Limited. I am ready to pick this card. I'm ready to first pick this card, if I'm being completely honest. It's going to happen. At least one time I'm first picking this card. I think this is really strong. So it's a 4-mana 3/2 flyer. So if you don't return one of your permanents, it's not very good. It's just a harder to cast Snapping Drake, and that's not what you want in Limited. What you really want is to have some kind of decent enter the battlefield effect on a creature that you're going to return with this, which we've seen a lot of. You know, it would be nice to return a Bloom Hulk. It would be nice to return... I mean, if you're living the dream, you could return, like, Massacre Girl, if we're just talking about other cards that we talked about today. But yeah, there's like a lot of other good enter the battlefield effects on creatures in the set. There's like a few creatures that amass as they enter the battlefield and stuff like that. So with any of that, it's obviously great, but more importantly, there are 20 uncommon planeswalkers in the set, and every single uncommon planeswalker has only minus abilities. So if you have any of those in your deck, you can just, after you've used their minus ability whatever number of times, bring them right back to your hand, recast them to refill that planeswalker back to their starting loyalty, and start getting more value out of them. So I think this card's really cool. It's definitely a card I expect to pick highly and try out a lot in the limited format. So very excited to see it. Real fun looking card for limited. Final card we're going to talk about today is Grateful Apparition, 1 and a white for a 1/1 Flying Spirit. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, proliferate. So this is a Thrumming Bird in white, but it also proliferates when you deal combat damage to a planeswalker. I like that they're having the stuff do their combat abilities whenever they hit players or planeswalkers, just because there's going to be so many planeswalkers in the limited format. And it's also like mildly relevant for Commander and stuff like that. That way you can still get the value off of these combat abilities when you're just attacking somebody's planeswalker. I just think it's a nice addition that I'd like to see more of moving forward. Just because it gives you more value out of the cards. There's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, just talking about it because Thrumming Bird is seeing a lot of play in Commander. Any kind of repeatable proliferate effects are certainly exciting for decks that want to play a bunch of planeswalkers or want to play a bunch of counters and all that kind of stuff. So Grateful Apparition, just a nice, neat card for Commander mainly. For limited, I think you really have to be in the proliferate deck. You got to have a decent amount of planeswalkers or +1/+1 counter theming. And for standard, it's probably, I mean, it's a 1/1 for 2 in standard. That just seems very easy to kill right now. Decks are running like a gigantic amount of removal right now, so I don't see Grateful Apparitions surviving very often in standard. But yeah, those are the cards that I was interested in talking about today. Those were my favorites that were spoiled recently. What cards do you all like a lot? What cards do you hate? Are there any cards you hate? Maybe you hate Tomic, Distinguished Advocist, or something like that, because you love playing Crucible Strip Mine combos and pissing everyone off. Who knows? Anyways, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more. I will be back for more when the spoilers are coming. I think next spoiler video is going to be on Monday, because I don't think they do a lot of spoilers on the weekends. And next arena video will probably be Sunday, not Saturday, just because I don't have enough gold for another draft yet. So we'll have a little bit of break in the videos today. We'll have a little bit of a break in the videos this weekend, but I will be back still very soon. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you again next time.